All right. So, so as I have mentioned, we are discussing philosophies of education. So, at the end of this session, I would like to state the meaning of philosophy, define philosophy, identify the branches of philosophy, explain the relation between education and philosophy, differentiate between education and philosophy, classify philosophies, and explain the common philosophies under selected headings. Now, in fact, philosophy of education is a separate subject if you're taking your PhD in education. Okay, I took my PhD in education in CSU, and one of our subject is actually philosophy of education, and that is taken as a separate subject because there are so many things that we can discuss in philosophies of education. And what we are doing right now is we are congesting everything in just this session. Okay, we are congesting everything in this session, and I hope that I can be able to pull that off. Okay, as best as I could. So according to Thomas in 1968, sabi niya, education without philosophy is blind, and philosophy without education is invalid. If you notice, in universities, in the DepEd, for example, DepEd, state universities, higher education institutions, private or public, have their university philosophy or have their school philosophy. And this philosophy is on top of their vision and mission. Okay? And this vision and mission guides the formulation of the core values, of the goals and objectives or program objectives of the program. But on top of all these things is the university philosophy or the school philosophy. That's how important building a philosophy is in education, because sabi nga ni Thomas, education without philosophy is blind because you will not know where to go. Okay? You will not know what kind of curriculum will you implement in the school if you don't have a certain philosophy in mind. Okay? For example, one of the philosophies that we will be discussing later is idealism. Okay? Idealism is a philosophy in education. It's a classical philosophy in education. And idealism is different from another philosophy, which is realism. Okay? For example, idealism would tell us that our curriculum should be based on what has been studied in the past already. Okay? What has been studied in the great books already. Okay? Because these are eternal. This does not change. The knowledge there is constant. Okay? And those are important until the end of time. Pero realism would tell us that no, okay, it should be changing. Okay, our times are changing, and therefore our curriculum should be dynamic as well. And so therefore we should teach subjects that are relevant to our society, that is needed by our students. So you can see the contrast between these two philosophies. Okay? Because these philosophies, once are able to identify, can actually tell us, okay, or can actually direct the school on what particular curriculum should you implement in the school, what subject should be included there, okay, or maybe what teaching methodologies should be dominant in the school, like should it be lecture method, should it be demonstration, or we could explore problem-based learning, okay, those kind of things, okay. Kaya nga, as I was telling you, philosophy is actually directing the institution or a school for that matter, okay, on their classroom transactions, okay? And philosophy without education is of course invalid. Okay, sabi nga, philosophy is the pursuit of knowledge, and that's basically education is, right? That's basically education is. The term philosophy, okay, came from two Greek words, philos and sophia. Okay, philos means love, and sophia means wisdom. Therefore, philosophy means love of wisdom, or love for knowledge, or passion for learning. And that's what basically we want to instill from our learners, for them to appreciate knowledge, for them to appreciate learning, okay, and therefore develop the passion for learning and the love of knowledge. This brings me back to our lesson in the historical perspectives of education. That when the Japanese occupied our country, they want to instill in the Filipinos the love of labor. Okay, the love of labor, which is opposite to this, because training is different from education, I must tell you. Okay, training is different from education. Okay, so what the Japanese would like to instill in the Filipinos is the love of labor. Okay, but for philosophy, it's love for knowledge. It just brings me back there. Anyway, so wisdom is a combination of knowledge, intelligence, and initiative, helps us to recognize the value of life and to identify our place in the world. Okay, well, there are so many things. I mean, the universe is so vast. Okay, the universe is so vast. Actually, the observable universe is 14.7 billion light years away from Earth, and that's a lot of distance. You cannot imagine how a large 14.7 billion light years are. Light years is not a unit of time, okay, although I'm using year, but it's light year. Light year is a unit of distance, okay. So we are the observable universe, the radius of the observable universe is 14.7 billion light years from us. And that's a very large distance. And therefore, we could tell that there could be things that are existing, okay, but we have no knowledge of them. Okay, we have no knowledge of them. And people, okay, has the constant pursuit of discovering knowledge. Okay, they have this constant need of knowing what is all around us. Okay, as far as the philosophy of realism is concerned, because that was the idea of no other than Aristotle. Okay, Aristotle mentioned that, oh, our ideas are ideas. Okay, you cannot see them, you cannot feel them, right? What should be studied in school are actually those things that are real. And how can we say that things are real? According to Aristotle, things are real if you can sense them, if you can see them, if you can um, touch them, if you can taste them, if you can use your five senses. In other words, if they are observable, okay, if they are observable, and things that are observable are actually measurable. So those kind of things should we study. So the philosophy of realism by Aristotle brought the birth of disciplines in sciences like chemistry, physics, biology, okay? So those kind of things, okay? Mamaya pag-uusapan natin yan. All right, so philosophy is the values and beliefs every individual has in life. So it's not all about knowledge too, but philosophy is talking also about values, your belief system. Okay. In fact, if you have a certain philosophy right now, kung meron kang philosophy of education, I know that some of you are already teaching in the academe, in basic education or higher education, and I think and I would like to believe that you have formulated your personal philosophy already. You have an idea of what is your philosophy of education. And that philosophy that we are able to formulate, ladies and gentlemen, are actually can actually reflect our belief system. Anong pinaniniwalaan natin bilang isang guro? Anong mahalaga sa atin bilang isang guro? Okay? No two teachers are the same, I must tell you. Even if you're teaching the same subject, even if you're teaching the same grade level or grade year level for higher education, even if you have those things, kung magkaparehas man yung subject nyo, magkaparehas man yung grade level na pinagtuturuan nyo, you are not the same. You are entirely different. No two teachers are the same because no two teachers have the same philosophy of education. Well, baka sabihin nyo, Sir, paano kung na-identify ko na realism ako? Siya din ay realism. Di parehas kami ng philosophy. No. Okay? Why? Because we have different interpretations of this philosophy. Maaring tayo din ay eclectic. Okay? Pag sinabing eclectic, maaring ikaw ay nabibilong, okay, you can be categorized as in more than one philosophy. Maybe you are realism at some point, but to some extent, you are also a idealist. Okay, so it really depends on on our nature as a teacher. Maybe one of the factors would be our field of specialization. Okay, one of the factors would be our field of specialization. For example, if you are a social science teacher, I would tell you that you guys are most likely clinging into the philosophy of social reconstructivism. Okay, social reconstructivism. But if you are a teacher in science, we may be classified under progressivism. Okay, progressivism or realism, of course. Okay, so doon naka-reflect, okay, yung ating belief system. For example, I have a colleague, okay, who really puts emphasis on objective assessment. Napakahalaga sa kanya yung resulta ng examination, ng quiz ng mga bata, yung kanilang numerical scores. Mahalaga sa kanya yan. Nire-record niya talaga. And he is very diligent in and religious in in recording the scores, developing objective type tests, things like those. Because he thinks that these are actually measure of learning. That is his belief system. Kaya marami siyang nababagsak. Okay, marami siyang nababagsak dahil nga nakadepende yung kanyang pananaw sa pagkatuto doon sa resulta ng mga examination na binibigay niya sa mga bata. We cannot question that, okay? Because that is his belief system. But for some teachers, no, diba? For some teachers, they will not have this they will not have this strong inclination on objective type tests. Pero gusto nila yung performance-based assessment. Even though the student is not really performing well in the objective test, but the student can actually perform the task. The student can actually perform the skill, and that's good. Okay? That's better than having high scores increases, but you don't actually have the skill of applying what you have learned. So that's another belief system. Okay, so yun yung sinasabi natin about philosophy. Okay, our philosophy actually defines who we are as a person or as a teacher as far as philosophy of education is concerned. Okay, so in other words, philosophy, ladies and gentlemen, is the love of knowledge. Okay, it's an activity at the same time, as I have told you in different examples. It's a comprehensive picture of the universe. What is your worldview? Who are you in the universe? Who am I? Questions like those. Okay, that is answerable by how you define your philosophy. Okay, it's a guide to a way of life, and of course, philosophy and science. Okay, not the mother, the root of science as we know now. Okay, yung pinag-uusapan nating science at this very moment. Okay, uh, natural life sciences. The root of that is philosophy. May tinatawag kasi tayong natural philosophy noon. Okay. So philosophy is an attempt, according to Brightman, philosophy is an attempt to think truly about human experience or to make out whole experience intelligible. According to Alfred Weber, philosophy is a search for comprehensive view of nature, an attempt at the universal explanation of nature of things. These are just some other definitions. And according to Raymond, philosophy is an unceasing effort to discern the general truth that lies behind the particular facts, discern also the reality that lies behind appearances. Discern the general truth and discern and also the reality. Well, different branches of philosophy would give us different definitions of what real is. Okay. Um, uh, I will not discuss on that because I will be discussing that later on as we discuss the different types of philosophies. But I just have to tell you that, what is real is defined differently by several philosophies of education. There are five branches of philosophy. Okay, we have epistemology, we have logic, we have metaphysics, we have aesthetics, and axiology. Now, let me discuss firstly with metaphysics. So metaphysics deals with ultimate true nature of things. Okay, what is real? Okay, what is real? And then let's talk about epistemology. It deals with origin and sources of knowledge. Okay, and then logic. It's a systematic study of knowledge and its relationships. And then we have axiology, concerned with nature of morality and value. Let's define these things, or let's explain these branches of philosophy based on a real classroom situation. Okay, when we talk about metaphysics, okay, we are asking the question, what is knowledge, what is real, what is true. Okay, so it deals with the ultimate true nature of things. So maybe I would say, if I'm a realist, okay, let's study a science. Okay, let's study the parts of a flower because that's real. We can see a flower. Yeah, so let's study that because that is real. Okay, that is observable. That's measurable. So we have to study that. Okay, so that's me in metaphysics. But for epistemology, I would tell you, I would ask the question, how will I know if it's real? Okay, how will I know if it's real? So how will I actually learn this thing if it's real? That's epistemology. So dun pumapasok yung teaching methodology natin. Okay, dun papasok yung ating strategy in teaching, yung mga activities na pinapagawa natin sa bata. In the branch logic, systematic study of knowledge and its interrelationships, this is where we try to allow our learners to think, to reason out, to problem solve, okay? Because logic is reasoning. Okay, so we would ask them questions. So din po pasok yung art of questioning natin. Okay, the impact of our teaching activities, our strategies. And last but definitely not the least, in axiology, concerned with the nature of morality, ethics. Okay, what is good, what is bad. Okay. So, and of course, aesthetics, I would not like to forget that. Studies about the beauty and harmony in life. Okay. So, this is just a brief discussion of these branches of philosophy because if we deal with this, we may consume the whole time. But I just want to know you to understand the basic idea about these branches of philosophy. Okay. So metaphysics deals with what is real. Okay, epistemology is how do we know it if it's real. Logic is on thinking and reasoning, and then axiology is on ethics, what is good and what is bad. Okay, so let us now bridge philosophy and education. So what therefore is philosophy of education? Okay, so philosophy of education may be defined as the application of the fundamental principles of a philosophy of life to the work of education. Okay, so we utilize now our philosophy where we are now integrating philosophy to education. And uh, as I have mentioned previously, okay, those examples that I have mentioned about the choice of content in the curriculum, of instructional methodologies, are reflecting what we know as philosophy of education. Philosophy of education offers a definite set of principles and establishes a definite set of aims and objectives. That's what I've mentioned. So, what is the interdependence between philosophy and education? Well, we know that philosophy and education are closely related. As a matter of fact, yun nga sabi ko kanina, no university or educational institution exists without a philosophy. So education is application of philosophy, or philosophy of education is the applied philosophy. Okay, so you're now applying philosophy to education. It is the application of philosophy to study the problems of education that is known as philosophy of education. And according to Ross, philosophy and education are like the sides of a coin, presenting different views of the same thing, and that one is simplified by the other. But I'd like this definition. It is the application of philosophy to study the problems of education. Okay. Well, if we are if we are leaders or institutional managers or administrators, in planning, meron tayong tinatawag na SWOT analysis, right? Strengths, weaknesses, opportunities, and threats, okay? Yung SWOT analysis na yan, it could actually help us identify what policies and programs should we implement in the university or in a certain school, okay? Because once we have identified our strengths, we can use that to solve or to reinforce our opportunities. At the same time, we could use this to solve the threats and weaknesses. Okay, but how do we know if this is the problem? Okay, how do we know that this is a problem? How how do we or how can we become aware that this is the problem? Well, that again depends on what is the philosophy of education. Kasi yung nakikita nating problema ay nakadepende sa kung anong klaseng lente meron tayo bilang isang guro. Okay? Kung anong klaseng lente. At yung lente na yun, ladies and gentlemen, is your philosophy of education. So the way you look at things, okay, what is the problem, okay, what is the strength, what is the weakness, is dependent on what lens you are using. And your lens is your very philosophy of education. So education is the strongest instrument for the realization of the ideals of life, which is basically what philosophy is, no? And a civilized attempt to bring about the desired development of human personality. This indicates the fact that the plant of education draws its nourishment from the soil of philosophy. Philosophy answers all the ultimate questions of education. Okay, as it indicates that the plant of education draws its nourishment from the soil of philosophy. As I have told you, on top of everything that we do in education, in university or in schools, is the philosophy of education. Okay, so experts' view about philosophy, okay, John Dewey, okay, the proponent of experiential learning, defined philosophy as the theory of education in its most general phase. Spencer, true education is practicable only to true philosophers. So again, Dewey, education is a laboratory in which philosophical distinctions become concrete and are tested. That's actually true. Uh, I don't know how to pronounce it. Fitch, the aim of education will never attain complete clearness without philosophy. Well, because it's a guide. Okay, you will not know your direction if you don't have a philosophy. Okay, so this is just a contrasting illustration of philosophy in education. So philosophy is the theory, uh, and the practice of that is education. Okay, it is contemplative, more on thinking, but for education, it's the active side. Well, as much as it is the practice side. Okay, so it deals with the ends, but for education, it deals with the means and techniques. For philosophy, it determines what constitutes good life. For education, it determines how to make life worth living. So you can see here the relationship between philosophy and education. The practical side is there, found in education. So, like for example, you have formulated your philosophy in education. So this could actually give us an idea of what we want our students to become, okay, to become. In CSU, we have what we call intended graduate attributes, okay, intended graduate attributes or IGA. That's one feature of outcomes-based education. You will study that in assessment of learning, what outcomes-based education is. Well, the IGA actually is a kaya nga, intended graduate attributes. What are the qualities? What are the attributes that we want our graduates to have after finishing 4 years in college? And again, our IGA is again based on our philosophy of education. So it deals with the end, what we want our students to become, the end. But education focuses on how can we go to that end, okay? How can we travel from this point to that final destination of transforming our students to these intended graduate attributes, okay? So philosophy deals with the end in mind, but for education, we think of how can we go, okay, successfully, or how can we end up successfully in that particular end by designing educational techniques, by designing educational programs or educational policies. Okay. So an educational philosophy is a sound philosophy of education that is based on adequate philosophy of life, and philosophy serves as a source of objectives required by education, as I have told you. Okay. This is just a reiteration of what I have mentioned about the relationship of philosophy of education. Philosophy has a close relationship with the curriculum, because I have told you, curriculum is the sum total of all activities and experiences provided by the school to its pupils or students in order to achieve the aims of education. Philosophy and methods of teaching, critical thinking is essential to devise a method. So philosophy has also a close relationship to the methods of teaching. And of course, philosophy and the teacher, okay? Philosophy and discipline. Yung discipline na sinasabi natin dito, yung subject matter. Philosophy and textbook, important means for the realization of educational aims. So, lahat, maraming impluensya ang philosophy sa education, okay? Aims of education, curriculum, methods of teaching, the teacher himself or herself, the discipline or the subject matter, and the textbook. After this, I will be posting a link of a movie that you will watch. Okay, it's called Accepted. It's called Accepted, and Accepted is a film in 2006, if I'm not mistaken. Okay, the story revolves around a student. Okay, who was not able to pass any entrance examination in college. It's an American film. Uh, he was not able to pass any entrance examination when he was in college. Now, what he did was he made his own school. So not to disgust his parents, gumawa siya ng sarili niyang eskwelahan. Okay? So gumawa siya ng fake letter na nag-accept sa kanya na nakapasa siya dun sa examination at yun nga, gumawa siya ng sarili niyang school. So hindi lang pala siya ang nabigyan ng letter ng acceptance letter. But there are also many students who were given the same acceptance letter. And so therefore, these students would assume that this school is true, is real. So pumasok yung mga estudyante. Okay? So the problem there is, how can this main character run a school without any knowledge at all kung paano nga ba mag-run ng isang school. So what he did was, so he ran this school, he continued running this school, but in an entirely different way. And we can see in the movie how philosophy is working in schools. Because that main character has this philosophy in mind. Meron siyang filosofiya na, na dahil doon sa philosophy na yon, doon sa belief system na yon, naka-formulate siya ng isang klase ng eskwelahan na masasabi mo talagang ibang-iba sa nakasanayan nating klase ng eskwelahan. But the question there is, will that even be possible? Okay, will that design of schooling, of university education possible or feasible as of the moment? Okay, so papanoorin niyo yan after my discussion in the philosophies of education. Okay, so technically there are two branches of educational philosophies. We have the traditional philosophies and we have the modern or contemporary philosophies. For the traditional, we have four: naturalism, idealism, pragmatism, and realism. And then for modern contemporary, we have perennialism, essentialism, existentialism, reconstructionism, and progressivism. Well, these theories are overlapping in some extent, okay? You should not be confused when there are overlapping ideas because that's natural, okay? For example, idealism is closely connected to perennialism, okay? Perennialism. Realism, on the other hand, is closely connected to essentialism. And some aspects of realism are also seen in progressivism. Pragmatism is also closely related to progressivism, but some elements of pragmatism can also be seen in reconstructionism. Okay, so these theories or these philosophies are overlapping, but I will try my best so that we could distinguish these philosophies altogether. Okay, so let's talk about naturalism. The root word is nature. What's natural? Okay, so the basic concept occurred in 1860. It occurred in 18th century, and it is based on the basic assumption that the nature as a total system explains all existence, including human beings and human nature. That's actually yung root of everything. It begins with naturalism. Okay, it begins with naturalism. Materials in the physical world is governed by certain laws, and man, who is the creator of the material world, must submit to it, okay, to the physical world. So it denies the existence of anything beyond nature, behind nature, and other than nature. In other words, because it denies the existence of anything beyond nature, but basically let's ask the question, what is nature? Okay, what is included in nature? Okay, so naturalism is closely linked with realism because we think that what is real is actually things that we can observe, that we can use our five senses. two. Okay, so because of that idea, okay, because of that belief uh, that we deny the existence of anything beyond nature, okay, we have certain emphasis, or naturalists have emphasis on empirical and experimental knowledge. Okay, so empirical or empirical knowledge are those that can be experimented upon, okay, that can be manipulated, okay, that can be gathered, that can be observed. In other words, where you can apply the scientific method. Okay, so if we are a naturalist, okay, if we have a naturalist developer of a curriculum, what he or she includes in the curriculum are those that are empirical and experimental, like sciences, okay, like um, physics, chemistry, mathematics, those kind of things. So kung naturalist ka, yun yung ilalagay mo sa curriculum. So it stresses on sensory training, as senses are the gateways to learning, as I have told you. Values are developed from human beings' interaction with the environment. So stimulus response, again, behavioristic approach in learning. So instincts and impulses are expressed rather than repressed, because instincts are natural, impulses are natural. So there is no absolute good or evil in the world. All values of life, it's according to the values now, all values of life are creations of human needs, and no place for classrooms, textbooks, timetables, curriculum, formal lessons, or examinations. So in other words, according to a naturalist perspective, values are actually relative. Okay, sabi nga, there is no absolute good or evil in the world. So it's absolutely, it is relative. Okay, values are relative. What may be good to you may be bad for others. What may be bad for others may be good for others. Okay, because our definition of what is good and what is bad is again dependent on our experiences in life. Maybe it also depends on our culture as a human being, or our norms, our mores in the society. Okay, so that's for naturalism. The teacher acquaints the children with their environment. So, in other words, if we look at naturalism as a philosophy of education, we will have to think of the keyword nature, okay, or natural. What's natural and what is found in nature. Yun yung focus ng education if your philosophy is naturalism. So external discipline is altogether out of place, and discipline through natural consequences. Okay, so there should be natural. The way you discipline the learners should be through natural consequences. Okay, so these are principles of naturalism. It is child-centered. Education is a natural development of child's power and capacities. Negative education in early childhood, the simple persuasive way of initiating learning instead of using force. So natural education. Okay, education should be based on child psychology, and the role of teacher should be that of a guide. So because the role is just a guide, do natin makikita that it's really child-centered or learner-centered. So kumbaga, tinuturuan mo ang bata, okay? You are designing your teaching, you are planning your lesson based on the development, the natural growth and development of the learner. So you are not forcing education to the child, okay? You are teaching the child based on their inherent natural capacities, okay? Sabi nga, in early childhood, negative education in early childhood, the simple persuasive way of initiating learning instead of using force. So you are not forcing them, okay, but instead you are using their natural capacities to drive them for learning. Okay. Um, if you have learned in your principles of teaching subject, okay, our learners have cognitive faculties and appetitive faculties. And one of their cognitive faculties, cognitive faculties are memory, intellect, okay, attitudes and values. And these things actually are inherent of the learner. Lahat ng learner may ganyan. But there are factors that differentiates a learner. But for a naturalist perspective, we should drive our teaching methodologies based on their inherent capacity. Okay, based on their natural capacity. Okay, so that's naturalism. So we put the learner inside the teaching and learning process. And this feature is also the same, okay? You can also see this feature being child-centered or learner-centered education in other philosophies of education, like progressivism. Okay, so these are the some personalities that are along naturalism. We have Jean-Jacques Rousseau, Pestalozzi, Spencer, and Rabindranath Tagore. But Rabindranath Tagore, you can also see him in idealism, mamaya. Okay, there are forms, several forms of naturalism. We have physical naturalism, we have biological naturalism, and we have mechanical naturalism. What is physical naturalism? It deals with the laws of physical nature, govern the laws of human life, and adherence to natural laws is essential for human existence. Well, this is basically physics, okay? The laws of physical nature. What goes up must come down. That's gravity. Diba? That's a universal law of gravitation. Opposite attracts, opposite poles, okay, in a magnet attract, the same poles repel. That's the law of nature, okay? In chemistry, we have uh, um, concepts like covalent bonds, ionic bonds, things like those, okay? Archimedes principle, off-bow principle. So there are many theories, there are many laws that could actually explain why things are happening in the universe. Okay. And that is what we mean by physical naturalism. It deals with the laws of physical nature that govern the laws of human life and adherence to natural laws. Okay. That is essential for physical naturalism. For biological naturalism, it explains man in terms of lower form of life from which he has. Okay, so that's basically biology. Okay, and we have mechanical naturalism, believes man as a mere machine. There is no spirit or soul, and only matter is everything. Humanistic, okay, very humanistic ito. That man can actually control his or her own life. Okay, that your environment is also controllable. So what happens in your life is not a product of a supernatural being. It's not a product of destiny, but this is a product of your own actions, okay, of your own actions. So, naturalism and aims of education. It aims on the development of self-realization, self-expression, and self-preservation in children, cultivating self-restraint and a sense of moral values, making a child adjust himself both physically and psychologically to his immediate environment, and to challenges surrounding his life, and equipping the child to struggle for existence and ensuring his survival by making him the fittest. Okay, so basically developing the child. Okay, development of self-realization, self-expression, and self-preservation. This is very humanistic in its essence. Okay, if you can remember the Abraham Maslow's hierarchy of needs. Okay, the highest form is self-actualization. That's what we were talking about here. Okay, so also, making a child adjust himself both physically, again, very humanistic. If you are a naturalist, if and you are developing a curriculum, you are not only developing the mind of the learner. So you will not include subjects that will only develop the mind of the learner, but you will have to include subjects that develops the mind, the body, and the soul of the learner. So you are targeting the three domains of learning. You're not only targeting the cognitive domain, but you should also include subjects that will develop the psychomotor domain and the affective domain of learning. Promoting better humanity through the transmission of not only physical characteristics, but also moral values, basically affective domain. Promoting the perfect development of individuality of a child through the development of natural endowments. You will see this, okay, again in the philosophy of existentialism later on. Customizing the teaching learning process according to the child's nature, tendencies, capacities, likes, and dislikes. Very child centered. And redirection of human instincts. Okay, let's skip this part. Okay, okay. So let's talk about methods of education and naturalism. If you look at this, sabi niya na, the school to the naturalist is in no way different from the home. Kasi nga, naturalist is Naturalism deals with what's natural. Okay, so our learners are natural when they are at their home. So we have to take advantage of that. Kaya nga, sabi nga, the school should be in no way different from the home. In other words, we should design the school as if it is the second home of the learners. Okay? There are proponents like Froebel, the father of kindergarten. Take note of that. The father of kindergarten is Froebel. Okay, Friedrich Froebel. And then we have also Maria Montessori. Okay, and Pestalozzi. Okay, so these three people are actually envisioning that schools should be like homes. Okay, for example, Maria Montessori, okay, is an advocate of a teaching methodology wherein you have to allow learners learn what they want to learn. Okay, you have to allow learners what they want to learn. Um, for example, in a Montessori school, may mga materials na nakapaligid dun sa kanilang sa loob ng classroom. And once the students get in the class, okay, the teacher will not tell the students anong gagawin nila. Okay? But the teacher will give a specific period of time where the learners can actually explore their environment and do what they want to do. Okay? And do what they want to do. So what are you trying to do there? You're trying to evaluate and assess what are the interests of the learners so that you could build your lesson, or you could build your strategies in teaching based on the interests of the learners that you were able to observe during that particular activity. In that way, the learners can actually feel that they are themselves and they are learning within their home. So in that case, we could tell that there is actually no difference between the home and the school. So that is one thing about naturalism. Okay, we have to establish the school as if it is not different from our home. So it advocates learning by doing, playway method, as I have told you, observation and experimentation, and self-education. So these things can also be seen in other philosophies of education. Like progressivism, you can see learning by doing there. Okay, let's skip this
So,
part. Okay. So in terms of the curriculum, what should be included in the curriculum? Well, naturalism would emphasize the study of sciences. Well, because it is bringing on empirical knowledge and experimental knowledge, right? So what should be included in the curriculum are science subjects like physics, chemistry, biology, zoology, botany, and the importance also of language and mathematics. So that should be part of the curriculum according to naturalism. So there is very insignificant place with spiritualism. So if your school clings
ala
on
ka,
naturalist
nagsakit
philosophy,
ata.
yeah, I know whose mic is open. Okay. So in terms of spiritualism or religion, wala itong place sa naturalist curriculum. Why? Because these are not observable in nature. Okay? So it disregards these kinds of disciplines for a naturalist curriculum. So Tagore emphasized spiritual values which should be imparted not through lessons but practice. Pragmatism. Okay. Okay, let's skip this part. Okay, so who is the teacher? According to a naturalist, sabi niya, teacher is not only the provider of information and ideas, but is the observer and facilitator of child's development. So, alam niyo, on this naturalist philosophy, ang dami nating makukuhang information that we could bridge the contemporary philosophies. Okay, so as I will go on with our lesson, okay, I will point out those that are different and the same to naturalism. So Ross, according to Ross, teacher is only a setter of the stage. Well, a guide on the side. Okay, a supplier of materials and opportunities, a provider of an ideal environment. In other words, if you are a science teacher, in essence, you are a naturalist. Okay, because if you teach science, you don't actually give the information to your students. You don't give all information to your students, but you allow them to discover and explore to themselves what should be learned. Okay, and the knowledge and the ideas that they should learn along the way. Kaya meron tayong tinatawag na experimental method. Okay? We let our learners do experiments. In doing so, they will be able to generate knowledge. Okay? So you did not give them the knowledge. You did not give them the information, but they were able to learn the information. They were able to be knowledgeable of these ideas and concepts and theories because they did it by themselves, because they did the experiment. So by observing, okay, by using their five senses, they were able to learn those things. So what did you do? Did you give the information? No. Okay, did you provide the information? No. What you just did is that you are the setter of the environment. You set the learning environment for learning to happen. That's what naturalism wants us to do. Okay, so non-interfering observer. Okay, non-interfering observer. So the teacher is a non-interfering observer. So you don't interfere. Okay, you don't involve yourself directly in the construction of knowledge of your learners, but you are just there on the side, looking at them, guiding them. Okay, but you're not interfering with them. Okay, so according to Tagore, okay, the natural teachers, okay, would nourish the child's nature spontaneously. Okay, a real teacher humanizes the learning process and activates the mind instead of stuffing it. In other words, for a real teacher to humanize, you're not only developing the mind, but you're also developing the attitudes and values of the learner, and at the same time the skill of the learner. Yung KSA na sinasabi natin, knowledge, skills, and attitudes. Okay, that's what Tagore was trying to mention about who the teacher is as a humanizing individual. Okay, who is a human being nga ba, diba? So a human being is a holistic individual that is not only developed in the mind, but also in through the skills and their attitudes and values. So it is a teacher who kindles independent thinking, imagination, and judgment. According to Rousseau, a naturalist teacher should not be in a hurry to make the child learn, but should be patient, permissive, and non-intrusive because we are teaching depende sa natural capacity at ability ng bata. So you should be patient in waiting for the child. Okay? So mahirap itong gawin in a sense. Okay? Mahirap itong gawin in a sense because our educational system does not allow us to do this. Okay? But in other countries, meron silang tinatawag na individualized educational plan, IEP. Okay? For example, in Australia, they develop individualized educational plan which is based on the capacity and the ability of the individual learner. So magkakaiba sila ng materials. Depende sa gaano sila kabilis matuto, anong learning styles nila, anong learning habits nila, anong type of intelligence meron sila. Of course, they can do that because in the particular classroom, we only have 10 students or 5 students. But in the Philippines, we cannot practice that because in basic education, you have at most 50 or 40 students in the classroom. And having 40 individual educational plans will not even be possible, especially if you're holding more than one section too. Okay? So teacher cannot tell the student what the truth is, but rather must stand back and encourage students' self-discovery. Okay, discovery learning by Jerome Bruner. Okay, so you have to be familiar with those people, ha? Kasi lumalabas yan sa licensure exam for teachers. All right. Okay. Okay. And that's naturalism. So nature, empirical, what can be seen, what can be observed. For idealism, okay, we are now looking into the second traditional philosophy, which is idealism. Okay, so idealism is the oldest system of philosophy. The origin was there are certain books that would say it originated from ancient India, but this also originated in Greece. Okay, idealists believe that ideas are the true reality. So what you think, okay, your ideas are the true reality, which is opposed to realism, because realism think that what is real are the things that we can see, that we can observe. Okay, human spirit is the most important element of life. So if you are an idealist, okay, if you're an idealist as a teacher, you will have to develop, okay, your children's ability to think, okay, to to think about their own thinking, to reason out those kind of things. Yun ang focus ng ating pagtuturo if we think that we are an idealist. So all of reality is reducible to one fundamental substance, and that is the spirit, which has no place, once again, to naturalism, as I have told you. Okay, the act of knowing takes place in the mind and not through senses. So talagang binubugbog natin yung utak. Well, the disadvantage there is that idealists would tend to over-congest, okay, their teaching, their classroom, and advocates of the use of intuition for knowing the ultimate. Okay. They believe in three spiritual values: the truth, the beauty, and the goodness. But let's not talk about that. Let's talk about how idealism is reflected in the classroom. Okay. Okay. The educational implications. So for an idealist, okay, for an idealist, education is a process of unfolding and developing that which is a potential in the human person. Okay. Unfolding of what is already unfolded. Okay, so um, if you know Socratic method, have you heard of Socratic method, which was developed by Socrates? Okay, Socrates is actually one of the pioneers of idealism as a philosophy. Well, for Socratic method, Socrates during his time, ancient Greek, okay, ancient Greece, okay, when someone asks a question to him, okay, when someone asks a question to him, he does not provide an answer. Socrates will not provide an answer. What he does is that he throws back another question to you. Okay, he throws back another question to you. And then, of course, when someone throws a question to you, you are forced to think. You are forced to think. And in the process of thinking, you will have another question. So that question will be thrown back to Socrates. And Socrates will not again answer your question. Socrates will also give you another question. And in the process of questioning back and forth, okay, the student will be able to unfold the correct answer, will unfold the answer to their question. Yun yung tinatawag nating Socratic method. So you're not answering, but you are giving another question so that the learner will be forced to think, and in the process of thinking, in the process of questioning back and forth, the learner will be able to provide an answer to their original question. So yun yung ginagawa ng idealism. You are forcing your learners to actually think. You're forcing your learners to actually work their mind. Okay. So if you are a curricularist, okay, if you decide on what curriculum should we design, and what particular subject matter or content should we include in the curriculum, an idealist would include subjects that would foster the thinking process of the children, okay, that would foster the thinking process of the students. So that's according to idealism, which is very contrasting with realism. Kasi ang realism, kung anong nakikita mo, yun ang pag-aaralan mo. But ideas, can you see ideas? Of course not. Okay? Learning is a process of discovery in which the learner is stimulated to recall the truth present within again in the mind. So what is real is in the mind. It's perceived by the mind. Okay, so the teacher should be a moral and cultural exemplar or model of values that represents the highest and best expression of personal and human development. And you should take note of that. Okay, for an idealist, okay, for an idealist, from the word ideal, okay, the teacher plays a very crucial role. And what is that role? To become a role model to the to the learners. Okay, you should be an exemplar of values to the learners. Whatever you do in the classroom, okay, the way you act, the way you dress, the way you speak, the way you communicate with other people, the way you behave inside the classroom, you should be someone who can be considered as a role model. Okay? Kasi nga, sabi, representing the highest and best expression of personal and human development. So, learners think of you as if you are the best individual in town, and therefore I should be like you. But in these times, our learners have different sources of role models, right? The teachers are no longer the role models of students right now, but artists, celebrities, meron tayong tinatawag na influencers, have become the role model of this generation, di ba? For example, ginagaya nila yung mga napapanood nila sa YouTube, yung mga nag-vlog, yung mga vloggers. Yun yung nakikita nilang role model. But can you see, okay, or can we exactly see that the learners think that the teachers they have right now are their role models, di ba? So mahirap nang i-establish yan. Mahirap nang i-establish yan because there are so many factors now that could affect the perception, okay, the points of view of our learners and our learners, okay. But ideally speaking, we should strive to become the role model inside our classroom. Okay, so the proponents of these are Plato, Rabindranath Tagore, who you were able to see again in naturalism, Mahatma Gandhi, Socrates. Okay, it's not Socrates. Okay, students would pronounce this as Socrates, but it's Socrates. Okay, so idealism and the aims of education. So how do we aim education in terms of idealism philosophy? Again, self-realization. Then, okay, which again is um uh, you can see that in naturalism again. Okay, so students should acquire achievement in art, literature, mathematics, and sciences, which promotes new inventions. Okay, so development of moral sense and values, promoting the development of self-culture, which includes polite behavior, good manners, self-control, generosity, and sincerity. What is ideal? Okay, what is ideal for a man to do? What is ideal for the behavior of man? Kaya, kung merong tanong sa licensure exam na parang ganito, Rizal as a subject, okay, is included in the curriculum is reflecting what kind of philosophy. Pag yun ang tanong, ang sagot dyan, idealism. Why? Why is it idealism? Why is the inclusion of Rizal as a subject an idealist perspective? Well, ladies and gentlemen, bakit nga ba natin nilagay si Rizal as a subject? Because we think that the life of Rizal, that students can really learn a lot from the life of Rizal. Diba? They can learn a lot from the life of Rizal. And therefore, we look at Rizal as if Rizal is a role model. Okay? That the way he lived his life is a very ideal, and the youth or students can actually learn from the life of Rizal. So, yun naman yung application niya sa curriculum natin dito sa Pilipinas. Okay? So, the inclusion of Rizal values education, religion, okay? Um, what else? Theology, is a feature of an idealist perspective. Okay, because in idealism, one of its aim is to develop self-culture, which includes polite behavior, good manners, self-control, generosity, and sincerity. Pero baka sabihin nyo, sir, nakita rin namin yan doon sa naturalism. But again, okay, pinopoint out kasi mas mabigat ang emphasis ng idealism sa mga ganitong bagay. Okay, kaya ang sagot doon ay idealism. Okay, so pag nakita nyo yun, it should be idealism. Okay, okay. In terms of organization of education, it recommends well-planned formal classrooms for teaching learning activity and teachers considered as a mature person who transfers knowledge. Formal classroom methods includes lecture, discussion, presentation, self-activity, project methods, questioning, and role play. So ito yung mga activities na ginagawa ni teacher pag ikaw ay idealist. So kung mahilig kang magpa-lecture, kung mahilig kang discussion, mahilig ka sa presentation, you perhaps is an idealist teacher. Okay? But again, this is dependent again on the nature of the subject matter. Some subject matter or some subject or disciplines cannot be taught or cannot be taught with other strategies aside from lectures and discussions and presentations. Okay, so these are examples of formal classroom methods. If in contrast with naturalism, it recommends the use of experimentation, of problem-based learning, child-centered learning methods. But for idealism, ito medyo teacher-centered ito. Okay? Pwede ring subject-centered. Okay? So, ang ginagawa ni teacher pag idealist, lecture siya, discussion, presentation. Well, because in lecturing, okay, in lecturing, you are you are allowing your learners to think. And basically, that's what idealism is, right? Knowledge is transferred from a more mature person to a less mature person through formal and well-planned teaching learning methods. Who is this more mature person? The teacher. And who is the less mature person? The learner. So it's again pouring the information to the children or to the students. Okay. So for idealists, okay, for idealism people, um, the role of the teacher is to actually provide the information in opposed to as opposed to naturalism. Naturalism, it's guide on the side. You are not the provider of information. But for idealist perspectives, you have that role. You have to take the role of providing the information to the learner. Very traditional. Okay. What about in the curriculum? Well, according to idealism, curriculum is based upon the idea of the spiritual nature of man. Curriculum is a body of intellectual or learned disciplines. And you should arrange the curriculum in the form of a hierarchy with general disciplines in the top, followed by particular subjects. Halimbawa, ito. Yan. Okay? So education should have physical activities and also education should be spiritual activities. So ito yung mga subjects or disiplina na dapat na i-incorporate natin sa curriculum if you are an idealist. Okay? So there are religious spiritual activities, there are intellectual spiritual activities, subjects along these fields should be included. So example are language, literature, science, mathematics, history, and geography. Okay? For aesthetic, study of art and poetry. For moral, study of religion and ethics. Okay? So ito yung mga subjects na dapat i-incorporate natin. Well, for example, yung language. Okay? Yung language. Language is eternal. Even before we are studying language. Literature, for example. Literature has been studied for the longest time. Okay? History and geography has been studied for the longest time. So in other words, kung makikita natin dito, in terms of subjects, idealists believe that what has been studied before should be studied until now. Okay? Meron tayong tinatawag na disciplines uh, that prove the test of time or ano ba yun? That has been tested by time. Okay? So what has been studied before should still be studied now. Very perennialist din yan. Okay? So that's according to idealism. Okay? So the philosophy that's related to idealism is actually perennialism. Okay? So, according to Radhakrishnan, moral education should be compulsory part of education at primary and secondary level because of the philosophy of idealism. If you look at it, okay, if you look at our current curriculum in basic education, makikita mo yung feature ng idealism. How? How can you see the feature of idealism in our curriculum now in basic education? If you can see, in our curriculum, our subjects are arranged hierarchically, okay? Hierarchically, in hierarchic order. Our science subjects before, very, very observable before the K-12 curriculum, yung revised basic education curriculum natin, okay? In elementary curriculum, ang science subject, science lang, di ba? Ang English subjects, English lang. English grade 1, English grade 2, science grade 3, grade 4, grade 5. Science and health grade 3, grade 4, grade 5. Pare-parehas. Pero pagdating mo ng high school, pagdating mo ng high school, the subjects are already subdivided into sub-disciplines. Okay, specific disciplines. So yung science sa elementary, okay, first year, naging in earth science. Second year, naging biology. Third year, naging chemistry. Fourth year, naging physics. That is one feature of idealism. Okay, so you are arranging the curriculum in a hierarchic order from general disciplines into specific disciplines. Another thing is that according to idealist philosophy, what should be included in the curriculum are values education or moral education. That's why you can see in our curriculum, in elementary hanggang high school, meron tayong mga values education subjects. Iba-iba nga lang yung pangalan. Merong ESP, education sa pagpapakatao, at meron din yung values education lang eh. Values ed yung pangalan din niya. Okay, so nag-iiba ng pangalan pero parehas pa rin yung idea that we are incorporating moral education in our curriculum. What philosophy of education mirrors that? That is idealism. Okay? Okay, so for a teacher and an idealist, okay, teachers must be intellectually and morally ideal. Dapat marunong ka. Okay, dapat magaling ka. Okay, and morally, ibig sabihin nun, uh, you are a role model. You behave well, you act well, you are cultured, you are a cultured individual. Okay? Yun ang inaasahan sa iyo if you are an idealist. Okay? Marami tayong mga teachers na ganyan, yung talagang ideal. Okay? Yung mga strictong teacher natin, they can be classified as idealists. Okay? Teacher is a model for emulation. Okay, the type of education, according to Krishnan, the type of education which we may give to our youth depends on the fact that what type of teachers we get. Okay. Okay, so a teacher in an idealist perspective personify culture and reality for the student, be a specialist in the knowledge, and be a kind person who commands the student's respect by virtue of what he is himself, and be a personal friend for individual student. Okay, but the bottom line of this is that for an idealist teacher, I will give you a metaphor. A teacher who is so strict, okay? A teacher who is so prim and proper, yung bang nakapusod yung buhok, okay, a woman teacher, a female teacher, nakapusod ang buhok, naka-makeup, naka-lipstick, very strict in the class, very particular in the discipline of students, and in terms of discipline, napaka-stricto niya din. In other words, that teacher is very behavioral, very behavioristic in approach, okay? And dun sa lesson niya, program talaga. Kung ano yung nasa lesson plan niya, yun yung gagawin niya. Kung ano yung nasa textbook, yun yung ituturo niya. Okay? Because he is ideal eh. She is ideal. Yun yung image ng isang ideal teacher. Okay? Yun yung image ng isang teacher na idealist. Hindi ko sinasabing yun yung image ng ideal teacher ha. Yun yung image ng isang teacher na idealist. Okay? All right. Talk about that. Okay, now let's talk about pragmatism. Okay, so we're done with two. Okay, pragmatism is the third philosophy, traditional philosophy of education. Now, pragmatism adopt a midway between idealism and naturalism. Okay, so it is between idealism and naturalism. So derived from the Greek word pragma, which means action. Okay, practice. Okay, pragma means action or practice. So the general feature is that it is learning by doing or learning by experience, which you have seen again in the naturalism philosophy, learning by doing. At nakikita nyo ulit sa pragmatism. Okay? So it's known as instrumentalism or functionalism. Now, question. Why is it that it is midway between idealism and naturalism? Well, because idealism bring forth ideas. Naturalism think that what is real is those that we can see or what we can observe. Now, pragmatism is in between the two because we want to transform our ideas into practice. Okay? We want to transform our ideas into action. Kaya siya nandoon sa gitna. Okay? So that's pragmatism. So you have these ideas. And the moment that you were able to use these ideas, okay, to use these ideas and practice these ideas, and you learn from that practice, from that experience, that's the essence of pragmatism. Okay, so some proponents of this are James, John Dewey, of course, Saunders, Spears, Kilpatrick. Okay. So pragmatism is essentially a humanistic philosophy maintaining that man creates his own values in course of activity, that reality is still in making and awaits its parts of completion from the future. creation through continuous activity. The humanistic pragmatism that which satisfies the needs, requirements, aspirations, objectives of the human beings and cater to the welfare of mankind only can be considered true and real. Okay, as I have told you, humanistic philosophy is uh, endeavors to develop not only the mind but also the skills and attitudes of the learner, the whole human person. Okay. Meron din tayong tinatawag na experimental pragmatism. Whatever can be experimentally verified is true, or what works is true. Okay? It works like in naturalism, in empirical and experimental knowledge. Then we have biological pragmatism. Power and capacity possessed by human beings is valuable and enables him to adjust with his environment according to his needs. Very humanistic at the same time. Okay, let's skip this part. Let's talk about the educational implications of pragmatism. Okay, so in terms of aims of education, these are the aims of education according to pragmatic philosophy. It all-round harmonious development of individual, personal and social adjustment of an individual, learning through activity and experiences, reconstruction of experiences, creation of new moral and aesthetic values, social efficiency, continuous and varied experiences. Now, if you have learned or in social dimensions of education, one of the topics there that you will study is the four pillars of education. Ano tong four pillars of education na to? Four pillars of education is learning to know, learning to do, learning to live together, and learning to be. And if you look at these aims of education, okay, you could actually go back to the four pillars of education, okay? Because by knowing, okay, in the pursuit of knowledge, in the pursuit of knowing, a pragmatist teacher would design education, okay, that why once the learner or while the learner is learning, the learner does not only develop the mind, okay, but the teacher has to incorporate activities that while the learner is developing the mind, the learner knows already, or the learner knows to apply what he has learned. Okay, so not only learning to know but also learning to do, but at the same time while doing the activity, they work with other people, yung tinatawag nating social efficiency. That's learning to live together. But while doing that, while involving yourself in a social activity, you are learning how to adjust yourself. You are learning how to change your attitudes. You are learning to shape your values. That's learning to be. At yun yung tinatawag nating creation of new moral and aesthetic values. So yun yung aims of education according to pragmatism. Okay? What are the implications of this? Well, pragmatism revolutionized the educational system. Pragmatic trend is known as progressivism in education. It's very close to progressivism. And education must prepare the child to become an effective member of the community, and curriculum should include varieties of activities of real life. Now, kung titignan natin, okay, in a classroom situation, a pragmatism is applied when learners apply what they learn. Okay, is integrated when learners apply what they learn. Anong feature ng curriculum natin ang nagpapakita ng pragmatic philosophy? Um, we have what we call internship or immersion subjects, right? Yung internship subjects natin, yung immersion subjects natin, those are features of pragmatic philosophy. Now, bakit tayo nagpapa-internship? Bakit tayo nagpapa-immersion? Pinapadala natin yung mga estudyante natin in offices, in industry. Why? Because basically, we want them to apply what they have learned in their 4 years of college education. In the past 3.5 years, as much, no? 3 to 3.5 years of college education. So doon natin makikita kung alam ba nilang i-apply yung mga natutunan nila, yung mga theories, yung mga principles, na yung mga concepts na tinuro natin sa kanila in real life. Okay? So that's basically putting theories and ideas into action. And why do we do that? Why do we do that? Because these activities could prepare them in real life. Ba? Yun yung tinatawag nating authenticity. Could prepare them in real life. So these activities, immersion, okay? Katulad sa teachers, meron tayong tinatawag na practice teaching, okay? When you are able to do the practice teaching, you will be able to practice or to have an experience of what is happening in real life, okay? And in that way, you will prepare the child or the student to become an effective member of the community. Okay, so that's a feature of pragmatism. So, yung mga inclusions natin sa curriculum that allows the learner to practice what they have learned, okay? To put into action what they have learned. That's very pragmatic, okay? That mirrors pragmatic philosophy. Okay, so in the curriculum, it recommends broad field curriculum based on few principles. Principles of utility, kung anong pwedeng magamit. Okay, kung anong nagagamit. Kasi kung hindi naman nagagamit, bakit mo ituturo? Things like those. So like language, physical education, science, history, geography, agriculture, home science. So these subjects should be incorporated in the curriculum because the learners can actually use them in real life. Okay, yun yung tinatawag nating principle of utility. Ano naman ang principle of interest? Interest in conversations, creation and expression, investigation and construction. Because these skills are important too in real life, in the workplace. Okay, uh, after college, students has to be in the workplace. And what subjects should be included in the curriculum in order for them to effectively navigate the workplace? And if you identify this, you are following the principle of utility, which is it's a feature of pragmatic philosophy. Kung ano yung nagagamit, what can be put into action. Another will be principle of experience, okay, curricular and co-curricular activities. So at the same time, while you're designing curricular activities for the students, you should also design co-curricular activities for them, because you at the end, the goal is to provide them productive learning experiences. And then another is principle of integration of various subjects and experiences. And knowledge cannot be divided into watertight compartments. So yung tinatawag nating fragmented education, okay? So according to pragmatism, we have to follow the principle of integration. In other words, our subjects should not be designed in a very fragmented way. For example, um, in science, for example, in basic education, if you are familiar with the spiral progression approach, okay, spiral progression approach in curriculum, nagbago na kasi from the revised basic education curriculum or yung RBEC to the enhanced basic education curriculum or yung K-12 na alam natin ngayon, okay? Kanina, okay, yung first year, second year, ang science nila iba-iba. For second year, biology. For third year, chemistry. For fourth year, physics. But in this case, okay, yung sinasabi ng principle of integration is, we should not separate these subjects, okay? We should not treat these subjects as fragments, because there are concepts and theories from biology or from chemistry that can be applied to physics, or biology that can be applied to chemistry, or chemistry that can be applied to biology. Okay, so we have to design a curriculum that could enable the integration of these subjects. Thus, the spiral progression approach in the K-12, diba? In the spiral progression approach in the K-12, ang science nila, grade 7, grade 8, lahat ng disciplines andun. Diba? Merong physics, merong chemistry, merong biology, merong earth science, nakaseparate siya in 2 grading periods. But the focus of pragmatism is that we have to design plans or lesson plans that would allow the integration of these subjects. Anong konsepto ang pwede mong magamit sa biology para mapag-aralan ng chemistry? Anong konsepto sa chemistry ang pwede mong magamit para mapag-aralan sa biology? Okay? Kaya there we have the subjects like biochemistry, there we have the subjects like physical chemistry, because these subjects are integrating, okay, these individual disciplines together. Yun yung tinatawag nating principle of integration. And that's basically what we mean by broad field curriculum. Okay? Broad field curriculum. So you're not specifying the fields or the disciplines, but you are trying to integrate them to form a separate subject so that we could allow the integration of these subjects. Okay. This brings me to the idea of Edward Lee Thorndike, and he is known to his theory of connectionism. Okay, connectionism. Just take note of that. Okay. So, anong method of teaching mo kung pragmatic ka? Okay? So, you give importance to the child. Okay? Hindi importante sa'yo kung ano yung nasa libro, pero ang nasa sentro ng learning and teaching process is the child. It's very learner-centered. So, you use dynamic methods. You deny outdated, lifeless, and rigid methods of teaching. Ayaw mo yan. Participatory approach of teaching. Interactive lecture, discussion, role-playing, demonstration, experimentation, and activity-oriented teaching. So if you are a pragmatic teacher, these are the methods of teaching that you will employ in your class. So ayaw mo yung walang buhay. Gusto mo may ginagawa ang mga bata. Okay, may ginagawa ang mga estudyante mo. So you're not only lecturing, but you have interactive lecture. Okay, so you throw question to students, you give them tasks, you give them activities, you leave them with the activities so that they will be able to learn by themselves. Or maybe there's what we call participatory approach to teaching. Like for example, in the middle of the discussion, you will ask one student to explain a particular topic. Or maybe in the middle of discussion, you will group the students into pairs and you will assign one among them to become the tutor and one will be the tutee. Okay? Yun yung tinatawag nating peer tutoring. Okay? Yun yung tinatawag nating peer tutoring. Okay? So experimentation and activity-oriented teaching. And that should be, that is what 21st century education is all about. Okay? We want to design activities that are very close to what is really happening in the workplace. Okay? We have to design activities that could emulate or that could simulate what is really happening in the workplace. Okay? Halimbawa, sa practice teaching, mahirap lang gawin ngayon kasi online eh. Kasi online ngayon. Pero, kung ituturo ko tong philosophies of education face-to-face, I would have activities. Mamaya may activity kayo sa akin. Okay? Talk about that later. Okay. So, another will be, another principles of methods of teaching, okay? Principles of progressive learning, self-learning, self-effort, productive practical activities, principle of learning by doing, real-life experiences and real-life situations. So you don't only teach the knowledge, you don't teach the concept, but you let them do, okay? Let them do it, okay? And then principle of integration, again, integration of different subjects to get a unified view. Okay. For disciplining, hindi masyadong stricto ang teacher. Okay, no rigid discipline. Does not believe in strict and rigid discipline. It believes in social discipline which develop from child experiences. Based on experience, I have one experience when I was in college. We were doing an experiment, okay? And then my teacher is very pragmatic, okay? Makikita mo yung pragmatic philosophy sa kanya. Nakabasag ako ng test tube at saka ng beaker. Okay, nakabasag ako ng test tube at saka beaker. Pero hindi niya naman ako pinagalitan. Okay, because that's part of the experience. Okay, that's part of the experience. Because he was teaching us how to hold different equipment in the laboratory, different apparatus in the laboratory. So I was using a test tube clamp, but I did not know how to use it. So I used it, but I dropped the test tube, so nabasag siya. But he did not become angry because that's part of experience. But I have to change, of course, the test tube. So I have to buy one and replace the test tube that I broke during the experiment. So that's it. So we have no rigid rules in the classroom. So purposeful cooperative activities help the child to develop mutual interest, initiative, self-reliance, tolerance, and consideration for others. And you consider the teacher as a friend, philosopher, and guide to the children. So you have very close relationship because you are there guiding the students of what to do. Okay. And fourth one, the last one, okay, the last philosophy that we have to talk about, as far as traditional philosophies are concerned, is realism. Okay, it is first explained by Aristotle. Okay, it's not Aristotle. Aristotle and later modified by Gemore, Russell, and John Wilde. Okay, idealism believed that what is real is perceived by the mind, but for realism, things we see and perceive are real, and knowledge acquired through senses only is true. So it seems like what you see is what you believe, something like that. What you see, to see is to believe. You don't believe in something unless you see it. Okay, pero pag idealism, you have to believe in first. You have to believe in it first before you see it. But for realism, I don't want to believe in it because I don't see it. Okay? Because I don't see it. That's realism. Okay? So things we see and perceive are real only when it is acquired through our senses. Okay? So there are many forms of realism, but we don't want to deal with that anymore. Let's talk about the educational implications of realism. Okay. So the aims of education in a realism philosophy is this, okay? It prepares the child for a real life, okay? Prepare the child for a happy and successful life. Fosters mental and physical powers of child. Developing and training of senses. Providing vocational education. And make the child familiar with the nature and social environment. So to navigate effectively in the environment of the child. Very close siya na naman doon sa naturalism as a philosophy of education. Okay? So in the curriculum, if in a realism curriculum, okay, that subscribes to realism philosophy, okay, it prefers subjects and activities which can prepare children for day-to-day living, okay, and science and vocational subjects enjoy predominant position in curriculum, followed by arts, literature, and language. Well, because realism is looking at reality that is only perceived by senses. Of course, andyan na naman ang science because of empirical and experimental knowledge. Okay? So what should be included in the curriculum? These subjects that could prepare the child for their life. Okay? For their day-to-day living. Ano-ano yung mga subjects na kailangan ng bata para manavigate niya yung kanyang surroundings, yung kanyang environment. What subjects can you see in our curriculum in the Philippines that is mirroring realism as a philosophy? One, meron tayong subject na EPP dati. Ano yung EPP dati? Yung tinuturuan ka sa TLE ngayon, Technology and Livelihood Education. Okay? So yung Technology and Livelihood Education is a subject na hindi nyo nakita from the other philosophies. But realism actually emphasizes the importance of this subject. Why? Because TLE or Technology and Livelihood Education teach us things that are very relevant to our day-to-day living. Paano magsusi ng damit, okay? Paano magtanim, paano mag-ayos ng sirang mga gamit, yung mga ganong bagay, yan ay malapit, okay? Or have a close relationship with realism as a philosophy of education. So yung mga technical vocational subjects natin. And sciences, of course. So ang nasa secondary lang ay yung arts, literature, and language. Because at some point, how can you apply arts in real life? How can you apply literature in real life? How can you apply, of course, language, you can apply it. But some things about language is not directly applicable to real life. Okay, so yun yung mga pinag-uusapan natin in terms of curriculum in a realism philosophy. Okay, next. What methods of teaching are true for realism? It opposes bookish knowledge. Okay? Nawala yung picture ko. Okay. It opposes bookish knowledge. So you don't depend on what is written on the book. Okay, what's provided in the book. Okay, justifies the use of audiovisual aids. Okay, and recommend objective method of teaching and importance of observation, experimentation, and activities. Okay, in terms of discipline, hindi rin to masyadong stricto. Okay, it believes in self-discipline. Bata ang may role to discipline themselves. So advocate moral and religious education. Who is a teacher according to the philosophy of realism? Hold an honorable position. Okay, you have an honorable position. You are well versed in the content and aware about the needs of the children, and you are interested in research and transferring knowledge in a clear and intelligible way. Okay, let's not talk about this anymore. I have told you this is a separate subject, and we are just congesting these topics in one, in two, in our synchronous session in 2 hours. Okay, all right. So we are now moving forward to the modern philosophies of education. Okay, so those are the four, okay, four major types of traditional philosophies. What are these? We have idealism, naturalism, realism, and pragmatism. But there is also one philosophy here, humanistic existentialism, but I won't discuss this in a way na existentialism siya. Humanistic. Okay. Now, let's talk about eclecticism. Eclecticism. Okay. Eclecticism is a philosophy wherein you have no single philosophy. Okay. You cannot categorize yourself as idealism, naturalism, or either either of the four, but you are clinging into more than one philosophy of education. Okay, so pag sinabi natin eclecticism means that no single philosophy alone can help the education to maintain its dynamic nature. So you are creating a new philosophy by pulling all the good and relevant features from different educational philosophies. Okay? So you call that eclecticism. So pwedeng part of you is naturalism, part of you is pragmatism, or part of you is idealism. If that's your philosophy, we call that eclecticism. Okay, eclecticism. And eclecticism is not bad at all. Okay, actually, in fact, we encourage eclecticism as a philosophy because, based on my own experience, so my philosophy of teaching is dynamic too. It changes. It changes. And what are the factors that brings changes to my philosophy of teaching? Well, one of this will be the nature of the learners. Okay, yung nature ng learners ko. Yung subject matter, yung environment, does it allow? Okay, for example, as much as I want to practice pragmatic philosophy, but is my environment allowing me to practice pragmatic philosophy? Are there instructional materials that could actually be used to practice pragmatic philosophy? So things like those. So sometimes we divert into a different kind of philosophy because that is what the environment is allowing us to practice. So education is driven by societal need, and needs are changing. Okay, needs are changing, and because needs are changing, well, our philosophy should also change. Okay, so an efficient education system promptly foresee the future needs of the society and reprioritize its aims accordingly. So this reprioritization helps the education to meet the demands of the society. Okay, so yun ang feature ng eclecticism. So it's just a combination of these philosophies. All right. Now, let's go back to the types of philosophy. Yan. Okay, as I have mentioned, naturalism, idealism, pragmatism, and realism are the traditional philosophies. Now, itong modern contemporary, meron tayong lima: perennialism, essentialism, existentialism, reconstructionism, and progressivism. I will discuss this in the fastest way, okay? Fastest way. Di-discuss ko yung traditional kasi, ito muna, dahil nga, itong modern contemporary philosophies are derived from the traditional philosophies. Okay? Pag alam nyo na yung idea ng traditional philosophies, you can basically understand what perennialism, essentialism, existentialism, reconstructionism, and progressivisms are. Okay? These are basically educational philosophies in the modern and contemporary way. Now, let's talk about perennialism. Now, perennialism is very similar to idealism. Okay, it's very similar to idealism. So perennialism believe from the word perennial, okay, perennial. It's a teacher and subject-centered philosophy, I must tell you. It's a teacher and subject-centered philosophy. This, if you're taking down, okay lang, okay? Nandun naman sa module niyo yun, okay? So yung perennialism philosophy, okay, so teacher and subject-centered philosophy. It came from the word perennial. Ibig sabihin, kung anong perennial means kung anong ginagawa ngayon, yun din ang gagawin sa susunod na mga taon. Okay? Kaya nga pag sinabing perennial, napaka-perennial naman yung ginagawa mo. Ibig sabihin, paulit-ulit na lang yung ginagawa mo. Okay? And perennialism as a philosophy is like that. Okay? So what is true in the oldest time should be true until now. Okay? Should be true until now. So kung anong mga tinuturo noon, yun pa rin ang itinuturo dapat hanggang ngayon. Okay? So sa anong aspeto ng ating curriculum makikita yung perennialist philosophy na yan? Halimbawa, noon may subjects na literature, may subject na arts, may subject na science noon. Hanggang ngayon, meron pa rin yung mga subjects na yan. Okay? Because they are the disciplines that has persist, okay, the test of time. Okay? Which were tested by time. So what is true before should be true until now. Okay? If you have the keywords like the work of the great books, yung mga ganyan, work of the great books, perennial knowledge, yun yung keywords natin sa perennialism. And by the way, perennialism hates change. Okay? Perennialism hates change. Ayaw niya ng nagbabago. Okay? Ayaw niya ng nagbabago. Kaya may mga subjects tayo na hindi talaga nagbabago. May mga disciplines na mula noon hanggang ngayon, andyan pa rin at tinuturo. That's a feature of perennialism. Okay, so that's the keyword, no? It hates change. Okay, the work of the great books, the work of the classics. Okay, and then it's perennial. Okay, it's repetitive in nature. Okay, the second one is essentialism. Now, take note, no? Habang pababa ka from perennialism to progressivism, okay, you are increasing the subject-centeredness of the philosophy. No, the learner-centeredness of the philosophy. Okay? So, ang pinaka-learner-centered sa limang ito ay progressivism. Okay? Ang pinaka-teacher-centered sa limang ito ay perennialism. Okay? So, you are increasing the learner-centeredness of the philosophy from perennialism to progressivism. Let's talk about essentialism. Now, essentialism, ang keywords natin dito ay basic skills. Okay, basic skills. 3 R's, reading, writing, and arithmetic. Okay, from the word essential. And what is essential? Ito yung mga basic subjects natin. So, kung si teacher, okay, yung curriculum natin, may mga basic subjects, andun yung 3 R's, andun yung reading, andun yung writing, andun yung arithmetic. Okay, that is one feature of essentialism as a philosophy of education. Okay, another thing is that essentialism believes that the teacher is a provider of information. Okay, the sole source of information. Siya lang ang may alam. Okay, kaya nga siya teacher-centered eh. Okay, so essentialism believes that the teacher is the sage on the stage. Okay, the sage on the stage. Okay, so again, I repeat, perennialism, the work of the great books. What is true before should still be true until today. What is perennial? Okay? So anong inclusions natin sa curriculum? Yung mga subjects na tinuro noon hanggang ngayon. Okay? The work of the great books, the work of the classics. Okay? Literature, arts, okay? History, geography. But for essentialism, ito yung basic skills. Ano yung tinuturo na basic reading, writing, and arithmetic. Okay? Existentialism came from the word existence. So existence precedes essence. Okay? So sa existentialism people, we recognize that our learners are actually existing in the classroom. Okay? Our learners are existing in the classroom. By saying they exist in the classroom, it means that they have individual abilities. They are also individually different. Okay, they are individually different. So one of them exists in the classroom and each of them exists in the classroom. And we have, as teachers, attend to their individual existence. Okay? Kaya, kung ikaw ay isang teacher that recognizes individualized learning, okay? Or individualized approach in learning, okay? That you do recognize that they have different learning styles, that they have different types of intelligence, you are catering to the philosophy of existentialism. So tandaan natin yan ha. Existentialism is when you are recognizing the differences of your learners. And by recognizing them, you are also giving them freedom to choose and to make their own decisions. Those are the keywords you have to remember in existentialism. Okay, so the teacher designs activities based on what the learners are, who the learners are, what type of learners we are dealing with. Okay, and if you look at that, existentialism is very close to what type of traditional philosophy? Of course, naturalism. Okay, naturalism. Okay, and of course, we have reconstructionism. Reconstructionism is very close to pragmatism and realism, but there is a touch of idealism too. Okay? Reconstructionism, or pwede rin siyang tawaging social reconstructionism, attends to the needs of the society. Okay? Attends to the needs of the society. So kung anong kailangan ng society, yun yung dapat nating bigyang pansin sa ating edukasyon. Okay? Halimbawa, sa pagpili ng mga subjects na dapat nating ilagay sa curriculum, tandaan natin na dapat isaalang-alang natin yung mga problema ng ating komunidad, yung needs ng ating society, yung demands ng society, like hunger, climate change, environmental problems, what else? Poverty, things like those. So if we have these existing problems, we have to develop curriculum content, okay, that could actually help us solve those social issues. Yun yung tinatawag nating reconstructionism. A very good example of this is what is happening in communist countries. Okay, yung Marxist philosophy, that's an example of a reconstructionist philosophy. Okay, um, for example, we teach subjects in economics. Okay, we teach subjects in economics, or perhaps subjects in social sciences. But at the same time, while we teach those subjects, okay, while we teach those subjects, we are teaching our learners to become a participant, to become an active participant in the society. So if we teach them to practice their rights of suffrage, to teach them their uh, what are their rights as students in the school, we are under Reconstructionism, because the ultimate goal of Reconstructionism as a philosophy of teaching is to change the society. Okay, is to change the society. So we have to include subjects that would teach the learners to change the society. Okay, and last but definitely not the least is progressivism, which again is very close to realism, pragmatism, and naturalism. And it's very not close to idealism. So, yun ang tandaan nyo hindi ito idealist. Ang progressivism kasi is learning by doing. Okay? Experiential learning. Okay? Experiential learning. The proponents of progressivism is John Dewey. Okay? So, you let your students learn. Okay? Ang kabaligtaran ng progressivism ay perennialism. Okay? Ang kabaligtaran ng progressivism ay perennialism. Kung ang perennialism ay ayaw ng pagbabago, progressivism loves change. Okay? It recognizes that our society is dynamic. Okay? Our society is changing, our society is dynamic, and therefore our methods of teaching, our curriculum as well, should be adaptive to the dynamism of our society. Okay? To the dynamic nature of our society. So you allow your learners to become participant of the teaching and learning process. As opposed to perennialism, no. The main participant there is just the teacher. Siya lang tagabigay ng information. Pero sa progressivism, no. It's a two-way communication. It's a two-way communication. The learner has a participation, the teacher has a participation. Words that you have to remember in terms of progressivism as a philosophy of education. One, democracy. Okay, the teaching environment is very democratic. Okay, in a progressive classroom, very democratic. The learner has a voice. Okay, kung anong gusto niya, pwede niya sabihin kay teacher, and the teacher has to do something in order to attend to the needs of the learners. So meron silang power in the classroom. Okay, the learners have certain amount of power in the classroom. Okay, so democracy, and then change. It loves change. Okay, it is dynamic. So as a teacher, you have to use um, strategies or teaching methods like problem-based learning, activity-based learning, experiential learning, discovery learning. So it's very learner-centered. Okay? So yun yung pagkakaiba ng five modern contemporary philosophies na to, which you can closely relate to the traditional philosophy. So that's why I discuss the traditional philosophies first, so that you will understand these modern and contemporary philosophies. That they are overlapping to some extent. Okay, they are overlapping to some extent. Now, let me just tell you one thing more. The hierarchical order of subjects in the basic education is anchored on the philosophy of essentialism. Okay? Is anchored on the philosophy of essentialism. Yung pagka-arrange ng mga subjects natin, that's essentialism. Why? Because uunahin muna natin kung ano yung basic na matutunan. Kung anong kailangang matutunan bago mo matutunan yung mga complex learning outcomes. So that again is an essentialist perspective. Okay, that's an essentialist perspective. Okay, so that's for our discussion of the philosophies of education. You see, we spent um, more than at least 2 hours. Hindi ko pa na-explain na maigi tong modern contemporary philosophies. Okay, we don't have more time anymore to elaborate further, but at least, okay, I was able to deal with the traditional philosophies, because by dealing with this, by explaining the traditional philosophies, we begin to understand the modern and contemporary philosophies. Okay, so there